I would like to call this July 14th, 2020 Johnson County Board of Education meeting to order. Ms. Weckesser, please note that all 7 board members are present in the boardroom today. At this time, we will be joined by the invocation by Ms. Tracy Zukowski and the Pledge of Allegiance by Ms. Terry Sessoms.
Everyone bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the ability to spend another day with you, gracious Lord. We thank you for your salvation, which you've given to us, for rising on the 3rd day and sitting at the right hand of your Father, gracious Lord. During this time, a lot has been happening that you're so aware of, and many burdens have been placed on many. Fear is here, gracious Lord, and as we move forward to make these decisions for our school district staff and students, gracious Lord, I just ask you to remind each and every one of us that we are in your hands, and that your will, gracious Lord, is the best place that we can be. I ask for discernment as we move through this board meeting and listen to the plans that our district's putting before us. Lord, I just pray that you help us all to make the right decision for our staff, for our students, and for our community. I pray blessings on everyone around this horseshoe, gracious Lord, for those at home watching, for all of our staff and our students and our community, gracious Lord. I pray for health, and I pray for peace and understanding. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go into closed session, I would like to have a special welcome to Dr. Eric Bracey, our new superintendent for Johnson County Schools. Today is his first board meeting. Dr. Bracey, welcome. And so at this time, Dr. Bracey.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that we enter into executive session for the purposes stated on the agenda.
All right. Do I entertain a motion to go into closed session for the purpose stated on our agenda? Motion by Ms. Teresa Grant, second by Mr. Ronald Johnson. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We'll now convene back into open session. We have already started our meeting with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance and had closed session. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for the June 9th, 2020 regular session. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Wooten. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries 7-0. Now I'll entertain approval of the minutes for the June 18th special session personnel minutes. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Wooten. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries 7-0. I'll also entertain a motion for the approval of the June 23rd special session minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sessom, second by Mr. Johnson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries 7-0. At this time, I'll ask, are there any adjustments to the agenda, starting with Mr. Johnson?
No, sir, no adjustments.
No,
Miss-
sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Dr. Smith? Miss,
No, sir.
I do have one, and that is just we approved the agenda with superintendent for item L under consent items for the superintendent. So that would be under consent items. It'd be item L under 8AL. So I entertain a motion. Motion by Ms. Grant, second by Mr. Johnson. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries 7-0.
Mr. Seward, do we need to change this as an agenda item or just amend the agenda to put the student? We were gonna-
I think it's okay if we just leave that one.
Okay.
This one and just send it down.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll have updates from myself as well as the board committees. Before we call on the board committees, I would just like to make a statement. You know, I'd like to begin today with comments regarding graduation ceremonies for our 2020 senior class in Johnson County Public Schools. The COVID pandemic has altered so many aspects of our normal lives in recent months. This includes what should be a celebrated time in the lives of our senior class and their families. In May, a graduation task force of students, school, and district staff, along with local health and safety officials, was developed to assist the district in determining the most desired and safe options regarding this event for our seniors. A survey was provided to all seniors and their families, outlining options for graduation. At that time, the most desired option for graduation was to delay the event from June 12th to later in July in order to provide a modified traditional graduation. The second choice selected was to offer a drive-through, drive-in option. As the summer has progressed, the conditions related to COVID-19 have created more safety concerns related to this ability to hold the modified traditional graduation ceremonies as planned. The district also offered a more restricted modified graduation ceremony option to attempt to hold to this original plan. Even with these additional restrictions, our county health department does not support holding traditional modified graduation ceremonies. We appreciate the tremendous efforts of our health and safety partners. Therefore, Johnston County Public Schools made the difficult but safe decision to move forward with the second option to hold drive-through, drive-in ceremonies. Our seniors are so important to us, and we know that this is not the outcome everyone wanted. But we will ensure that these ceremonies will be well-planned and a great event for our students and families of Johnston County Public Schools.
Just to follow up to the chair, I bring a perspective tonight, not only as superintendent of Johnson County Public Schools, but also as a father of 3 daughters. And my oldest daughter, who's headed to college next year, is a member of the class of 2020. She also lost her traditional graduation. And I'll be the first to admit, this is not how we planned or hoped to have celebrated the class of 2020, our seniors. But due to the current circumstances of COVID-19 and coronavirus, we still want to make sure that our seniors are celebrated in a big way here at our schools. I had a great meeting with our high school principals yesterday, and we talked about graduation and the circumstances that we're facing, and I've asked them to make sure they are very creative and hold wonderful ceremonies for our seniors this year, our seniors and their families. And our principals have assured me that they are going to do just that. This is not the ideal way we plan to celebrate our seniors, but these are the circumstances that we have dealt with. And something you may not know, during my first full week here, we met with our health director, Dr. Pearson, just a wonderfully supportive lady and has been for quite some time. And we presented a plan for a modified graduation to her, and she gave it great consideration, but at the end of the day, she didn't think that was safe to have that many people, that number in one location for these graduations. And so we're gonna have these drive-in individual ceremonies, whatever our principals come up with their communities. And we're gonna get that information out to our communities and our parents and the media as well. So I urge our parents to be on the lookout for communication from their principal, which will provide great detail for our graduations this year.
Thank you, Doc.
If I could say one more thing, Mr. Chair, I want to thank the graduation task force. It occurred before my time, but I want to thank them for the wonderful work that they put into the graduation. And I commend the administration and the board because everybody had good intentions and well wishes when they made the decision to delay, hoping that the numbers would decline, but instead the numbers have done just the opposite. They've increased. So everybody had good intentions with this. It just didn't work out the way we all wanted it to work out.
Mr. Sutton, may I? I too am a parent of a graduating senior for class of 2020 at Corinth Holder High School. We were very much looking forward to a graduation with our son. We did choose the traditional method and decided to wait in hopes to getting that traditional graduation. But I say all that with a grain of salt of a mother. Thomas is incredibly happy that he's done with school. So graduation to him is just something he's got to put on a cap and gown and walk across the stage. It still makes me sad as a mother, as it does many of you out there in our community. And we know that as a school board. We know that. But remember that this class is the class that was born during 9/11, and they're graduating during a pandemic. And if this class can't overcome anything that life puts in front of them, they are more than prepared to do that. And we need to support our seniors and our principals and our administration and teachers of our schools in the decision that has been made.
Mr. Sutton, may I speak? I also want to take the opportunity to thank our principals and our teachers, our educators, those folks that have really gone the extra mile to try to make these seniors feel special. I couldn't be more proud of our schools, our high schools, going and delivering signs, shirts, gifts, you name it. Some had parades. We had, fireworks displays at some of the schools. So I just want to thank our high school staff and administrators for all that they have done to try to make these seniors feel special. And it does hurt my heart as a mother that they're not going to get to walk across the stage the way they thought they would. But, different is not always less than, and they will overcome. And I am extremely excited to see what this generation is going to do, because they have faced a lot of obstacles, and those obstacles only make us stronger. So I look forward to seeing their accomplishments.
Thank you for those comments, and I hope Mr. Johnson's okay with this. We were talking, and we want to make this as fun as possible, and just have as, this is a special event that they remember for years to come. It is going to be different. We all understand that, and it's not something that we intended on doing. And like Dr. Bracey said, we thought we were being proactive by moving it out so that we could accommodate some type of modified traditional graduation, but unfortunately we can't. But we were kicking around the ideas, and if Mr. Johnson wants to share one of the ideas that we had discussed.
Well, at the risk of embarrassment, I will share the idea. Have them come down a walkway with almost like a projection thing, pictures of them celebrating, and at the event of sounding less than intelligent, it would be comparable to a WWE entrance, and just have them celebrated with their people all around them and socially distanced, things of that nature, something to really set it off. And since you said it, I think I mentioned fireworks, and let them pick a song that's appropriate that they come out to. I mean, you always have your sing your song, but, make it individual to them, something that they can really be proud of, put their mark on, and celebrate the way they want to celebrate, because they have been robbed. I mean, to no other credit or discredit, it's society. I mean, they were robbed by this pandemic. They were told one day you're not coming back to school, and all of a sudden their life has changed. And someone pressed the pause button on the most exciting time in their life, and it's extremely unfortunate. And we need to celebrate these students. And we need to do, if we have to have a hazmat team out there to clean, we need to do it in a way that they can be proud of it and make their mark on their biggest accomplishment to date.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I didn't mean to call you out on the spot, but I thought it was a great idea that we were kicking around. And again, I have a lot of families that go to church with me that have seniors, and I understand what they're going through. And I've got a daughter that's going to be a sophomore, so I truly understand what it could be in 2 years. We may still be dealing with some type of pandemic that causes issues. So at this time, I'll get some updates from the board committees, starting with Mr. Wooten with Finance.
Excuse me, mashed the button. But the Finance Committee has worked hard this year and I appreciate the commissioners for their support of our budget for the upcoming school year. Fund balance is in a position that we have not been in the last 2 or 3 years, and things look bright as far as the finance. We've got a new finance officer for the school system, and he's on Dr. Bracey's team, and excited about getting to know him better. And the communication has already started with the county commissioners and the school system as far as the ongoing budget for this upcoming school year. And I expect great things this coming year. So thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to commend Teresa, Mike, and Ronald for their hard work on finance. And what it did show that we were more detailed this year, and I think that was set well with our commissioners. And we were able to get our budget increased a couple $1 million from what they were talking about. So I want to thank each and every one of them at the county commissioners for that. Mike, you said it. Mr. Stephen Britt joined us July 1st as Chief Financial Officer as well, and excited about him and listening to him already with the pandemic and things that he's looking at from a transportation as well as other items that really could assist us. And his knowledge is just unreal. So glad to have him at Johnston County Public Schools as well as Dr. Bracey. So now we'll go to Dr. Smith.
Thank you, sir. Sorry. The Policy Review Committee meets regularly, and as you can see by the number of policies that we have on the agenda today, quite extensive work. Our District Elections Committee met. Ms. Zukowski and I met and received the report from Ms. Sessoms about the district size, and Ms. Zukowski had done extensive research about achievement. Mr. Johnson is going to investigate the cost and the timeline for getting districts drawn. We will hold our public hearing in September. My mistake entirely for reversing the process. I've gotten lots of feedback about ways to make our recommendations stronger, and we are going to consider all of those. In fact, we've had some extensive research, and I'm providing the Public School Forum information about costs and size of districts for our next meeting. Our third and final committee is the Legal Services team, and we have not met, one, because I think we're kind of happy with what we have, but we were actually waiting for Dr. Bracy to come on board so that we could meet with him, and I have sent him the information way back. But we want to do our proposal in a methodical and thoughtful way. At this point, we're thinking dual roles, one in-house and one contracted service, but that is just right now in the thinking process. And when we get, Dr. Bracy has a little more time to settle in, and, because we're not in any hurry at this point, since we have been well represented by Tharrington Smith. So those are my reports. Any questions from anyone or any additions, ladies? Mr. Johnson, Ms. Grant, you all serve on committees with us. If you have other comments.
Thank y'all for the updates, and, know that a couple of those are definitely a lot of time is consumed in that, so we appreciate all those. Moving on, we do not have any advisory appointments tonight. I will make note that our public comment is at 6 o'clock, but they have been linked to our website as far as public comments tonight. So we will move past 6 o'clock since we do not have any public coming into the boardroom tonight. But all of the comments are on the website, and we will take time. Anybody who's watching, we will be taking time to read those comments, and we value your comments, so we appreciate you submitting them in to us. Going on now, we'll turn it over to Dr. Bracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I ask that the board approve consent items 8A1A through 8A1L.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent items. Motion by Ms. Grant.
Chairman Sutton, I do have a couple questions about letter K.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second. Mr. Wooten, now yes, sir.
Dr. Bracy, when you're talking about the Apex Learning Digital Curriculum, can you tell me, and I read briefly about it and did a little research, but can you tell me, we're implementing this, and to date, teachers have not had any type of professional development, but will they have any professional development, sir?
Correct. Yes, sir. Teachers will have professional development for Apex Learning. Yes, sir.
And can you give me a comparison of how this would work with Connexus, or would you want me to wait for Dr. Coates if she's coming in? I know that is kind of her wheelhouse. I can wait for her.
Yes, please, because I don't have the history of Connexus and how it compares, and she's right there, in fact.
I was prepared.
And Dr. Coates, briefly, I'm not so sure if you heard, but I know that we have utilized Connexus, and to my knowledge, we are under a contract with Connexus. Can you tell us how our agreement with Apex Learning would coincide or work well, or how would that apply as far as our contract with Connexus goes?
Yes, we are under contract with Connexus. We do not have a minimum use amount. At the time that the board approved the Connexus contract amount, we were not involved at all with Apex Learning, or were not looking at it at that time. We do not have to spend the amount the board approved. We do have to use Connexus in some form or fashion. I have been working with Tharrington Smith attorneys on that, and just so we use the product, we could use it for a basic credit recovery, small group, something. But we will have to use it, but we will not have to use it to the full extent that we approved. Now, did you want me to answer the other question you asked, or?
I was going to ask Kensu real quick, if you don't mind, ma'am. Kensu, is there like any exclusivity clause that we have with Connexus that could be in conflict with this Apex Learning Digital Curriculum? Or I imagine you might not have had time to review the contract.
I've seen, I know, Rod, have you been talking to Rod about
Rod and Deborah.
I'm not aware that there's any exclusivity provision in there. I don't believe that there is.
Yeah, that's what they checked out for me.
Okay.
There's not.
So just to be clear, Connexus took over iReady, correct?
I do not know that, sir. I know how we've used Connexus as
No, I
been our
mean,
online.
We replaced iReady with Connexus.
We had Connexus at the same time. iReady was more of an intervention type program. We've utilized Connexus for online learning.
It was Nexia. I'm sorry, I'm getting the
Yes,
Connexus.
yes.
Okay, I got
They-
you.
They
I'm
do
with you.
sound similar, yes, sir.
And Dr. Coates, isn't Connexus the credit recovery portion
It
of?
is used for credit recovery and can be used for credit recovery and can be used for first-time digital learning. There's those models within it.
And do we have both of those models?
Yes.
Okay.
And Dr. Coates, Apex Learning also has a credit recovery component as well. correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Apex Learning, to explain the Apex Learning, the credit recovery is called a prescriptive program. And what that means is that if a certain student needs to credit recovery, they would work, the teacher would work with the skills the student needed to recover, the areas of focus, and that would be a prescribed component, what they would complete those specific elements of the course, not the entire course. First-time courses, of course, have to cover the entire course per the State Board of Education policy. Apex Learning has prescriptive courses in those that are required for graduation. They do not offer prescriptive in every course, but they offer it for those required for graduation, the basic 22 credits that North Carolina requires. They also offer a core level, which is grade level. They also offer honors level in many of their courses and an advanced placement level. In fact, they started with advanced placement. So all of that will be available. The only course that's currently approved by the state that's not in there is Math 4. They're developing that, but the state just approved those standards. So that one is forthcoming. It would probably not be accessible until the spring semester.
As a point of reference for my mental capacity, I just referenced WWE, so you're going to have to bear with me on this. I am under the impression, I'm trying to dumb it down for myself, and having Connexus and Apex Learning seems like having satellite and cable. Can you tell me the difference? That what advantage are we going to have with going with Apex Learning? I think you went through some, but when we're spending
Right.
quarter meal, I want to just know why. I mean, just why are we doing this? Obviously, we got to move forward. I think the governor kind of laid it down what was going to happen with the school system in the near future. We got to have a digital platform for kids to have that learning option from home. Can you just kind of give me a feel good of why we're going with Apex?
Yes, sir. The biggest advantage is the alignment to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study and a list of courses that meet the North Carolina Standard Course of Study and are aligned to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. Those include English, Science, Social Studies, Math, elective courses, world languages, and some career tech. The other advantage is in this platform, it translates into 29 languages, and that is through the printed and the spoken. So if we're working with students who are struggling, many of our students are great with conversational language if they're learning our language, but they're not good with reading and comprehension. It can translate into their language, and it can do that with the print and the audio, yes. And I did check, our second requested language, the next one beyond Spanish is Arabic, and Arabic is one of those languages that it translates into.
I just have one question.
Sure.
Moving forward with Apex Learning, what is the role of our Johnston County teachers with that program for students who are learning virtually through Apex Learning?
The current plan that our department is putting forth is to utilize Apex Learning in a variety of ways. It can be utilized as tutorial. It can be utilized as credit recovery. It can be utilized exclusively as first-time course with a teacher facilitating just this content. It can be utilized blended. If I'm teaching advanced placement calculus and I don't have good materials for the unit on, volumes of solids of revolution, I used to teach that. This might be a better resource on that, so they could use it both ways. So it's really up to the teacher and how we would want to utilize that. I would support very much a blended model of learning so that our teachers have it if they need it in certain areas and if they don't. The agreement that we're proposing allows every teacher all access to every course. It's not a license-based, it's 612,
every teacher access to every course. So if a 7th grade teacher needed to back up and do some 6th grade remedial things with a group of students, they have access to that course. It's not determined by what they're currently teaching.
Wonderful. And let's be clear, it's 6 through 12 for Apex Learning,
6 through
correct?
12 for Apex
Thank
Learning,
you.
yes, ma'am.
This may be a little, maybe I should have asked this question months ago, but if we didn't have Apex Learning 3 months ago when this happened, were teachers developing their own?
Teachers
program?
have and will continue to have to do that. They will be developing their own. But just as in any environment, you know, when you teach face-to-face and you're suddenly thrust into a virtual world, it's different. And some people adapt to that more rapidly than others. Evidence shows that quality online instruction is not merely taking your face-to-face class and putting it out there online. So it is different teaching. So this is a strong support, and we will have teachers who will want to facilitate this course exclusively. We will have other teachers who want to utilize what they have developed in conjunction with this. We want to be able to support whatever they need in this difficult environment.
Any other questions?
You mentioned, well, actually Tracy mentioned that this was for 6 through 12.
Yes.
As far as K through 5 goes, is there anything that we're going to be doing for them, or is there something already in place that you're satisfied with?
We're looking, but right now the plan for K-5 is for our teachers to teach our curriculum as we're developing in summer learning to teach our curriculum virtually. But we are looking at other ideas because we want to provide we feel is the best thing for student learning. We don't know how long we'll be under this, and we just want to have look at everything available and make the best decision.
Unfair question alert. Do you have an anticipated time where we can come to something that we can do through for the K-5 folks?
I know we have meetings scheduled this week to talk and look at programs. As far as would we make a decision, that would depend on the quality of what it is. There was a virtual call last Friday from DPI with respect to K-5 virtual, and they gave us some important data on programs they had seen that felt aligned. So we're looking at those things, not saying that's what we're going to do, but we feel we need to look at everything, and that's what we're doing.
And I think it would be straightforward that Apex Learning is not providing us anything for students in K through 5, but does Connexus or any other thing we have anything available
Not at
for
this time,
Okay.
as
Mr.
far as
Johnson,
courses. Sorry.
is your question, being that we're going to be under Plan B, so said the governor today, what will it look like virtually for K-5?
Yes, sir. That's kind of what I'm hinting at, all under the premise of trying to understand what we're doing for these
Sure.
teachers and the students who are going to be virtually learning for K through 5, because it seems like we have a plan in place for 6 through 12. Sounds like we got two plans in place with Nexus and Apex for 6 through 12, but I'm concerned with K through 5. I mean, the formative years are going to be tough to teach at a distance anyway.
Dr. Pierce is going to speak to that as a part of
Wonderful.
his presentation. He and Ms. Whittington.
Dr. Coates,
Yes.
I'm just curious how much innovation the state is providing, how much advice, how much guidance is the Department of Public Instruction giving? I know they have a very limited staff, but this is,
The thing that they talked to in the webinar, they made very clear they're not supporting any platform, they're not making recommendations. They just mentioned from the programs they have seen folks use throughout the state, what their opinions were with respect to alignment to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. And that was as far as the commentary went. So we're looking at those things. One of the other things we did look at, all volunteer, we reached out to districts around us to see what they're utilizing, especially those that have been very successful and those that are successful with similar demographics. And this is everywhere in North Carolina.
Dr. Coates, different train of thought, but another item on here. Appreciate the money that we've received to buy the additional Chromebooks. How close does that get us to ensuring that every student that needs a Chromebook for virtual learning is going to have one in their hands?
That's not my department, but I will tell you the little tiny bit I know about that. That might be a question for Ms. Gill's department, and I don't know if Dr. Pierce is addressing that a little later. But in the initial survey, that was one of the questions we asked when we were reaching out to families, and at that point, it was 30% of the population that had responded that said they needed a Chromebook. We did have, because of the closure, some of our schools that had allotted their remediation money to hire tutors, and then school closed suddenly and they couldn't. They utilized some of that funding for devices. So I think the departments in the technology department is in the process of ascertaining exactly what we need, but they are looking into that. I'm sorry, I don't have those exact
Problem.
numbers.
Ms. Gill's out there, I
Oh, is
saw
she?
her,
She
so.
said, I can step out if you.
Not yet.
Okay,
Um,
not yet.
I know, and Todd, we may have, I'm just going to ask the board's thoughts on this. If we don't have a plan in place for K through 5 yet, and something happens within the next week or 2 weeks, we may need to move to do something. So we may have to call a meeting in order for that one particular action item, since we don't have a plan in place unless you have authority or there's some expenditure, it doesn't meet the threshold for expenditures, or this would be CARES Act funds, right?
Yes, but we do have a plan. The plan is for our teachers to provide remote instruction, but you're talking about if we develop a platform.
A
That we
platform,
won't
yeah.
use, yes.
Okay, we don't have a platform in place. And you said you're meeting next week to
We're
kind of.
meeting some this week and next week.
Yes, ma'am. So if something happens in that period of time where it would require an action item in order to get resources, you would call a meeting within 48 hours, and then we can do that. So we're not held up waiting for what, August 11th, which would be our next meeting?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would have, this is a moving target every day, it seems like, on COVID-19 with the restart of schools and everything else. So absolutely, as long as the board is available to get together in a 48-hour notice, we'll have as many meetings as necessary to make sure that we have all of the materials and we have the strongest plan in place at that time. So absolutely.
But the key is, we have a plan.
Correct.
It's
We're,
just,
we're gonna hear some of the details tonight as far as what they've
Right.
got, and I think we'll go from there. But we'll listen to that, and then we can get down. We'll have some more special session meetings if needed, because I think this is near and dear to everybody's heart in here to make sure that the plan is as tight as it is, and all the stakeholders that need to be at the table to listen to them as well. So we'll definitely do that.
I have one more question for Dr. Coates. So, are we moving away from Connexus to Apex because there's a stronger alignment to the standard course of study?
When our contract with Connexus expires, it is my opinion, based on the data I've discovered, that Apex Learning is a much stronger alignment to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study.
Dr. Bracy, have you had any experience, because you've been in many districts and you've worked with, a lot of students, a lot of platforms. Have you ever worked with Apex Learning before, sir?
I have.
Share your thoughts, or you?
I thought it was a positive experience. I think it was Northampton. That was a long time ago, so I can't talk about it in great detail, but I can do some homework for you.
No, you co-signing on it, or you saying it was a great experience. I'm good with that. You've been places we haven't, so.
All my years are starting to run together.
Yeah,
but-
being old will do that to you, sir.
It will. But I'm pretty sure we've used Apex in Northampton or Sampson, and I was told positive things about it. I believe we use it for course recovery in
Okay.
one of those districts.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Coach, just one more thing for me.
Sure, yes, sir.
We're saying that we have no platform for K-5, but through the initial conversations, we've talked about Google Classroom.
Yes, we do
Wouldn't-
have those platforms.
Wouldn't you consider that to be a platform?
That is, and Canvas. Those are the platforms our teachers, I should have been more clear, a program platform that we would purchase. We currently use Google Classroom and we currently use Canvas in our elementary classrooms. And those are virtual platforms, and the current plan, as I said, is for our teachers to
that's the plan I
continue.
was talking about.
Yes.
You have a plan, but we don't have a
Yes.
platform.
We don't
to-
have, we do have a I'm just terrible with my
Yeah.
nouns. We have platforms, we don't have a separate
Right.
purchased provider for online learning like Apex or Connexus. And we are looking at those. Thank you for that clarification.
All right, any other questions? We got a first and a second on the floor for consent items. Great discussion. So at this time, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Dr. Bracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, I think we are at consent agenda item 2. Dr. Pierce and Ms. Whittington will come in and discuss in detail our initial plan for reopening. And we've discussed earlier that the governor has selected Plan B or Option B for us as school systems across the state. Dr. Pierce.
Good evening, Chairman Sutton, Lady Vice Chair, Dr. Smith, Superintendent Dr. Bracy, and members of the board. It's good to be with you all. 2 hours after the governor has announced how we're going to return to school, we have some things here that may need to be adjusted, and I want to be clear with that as this is a moving target always. But thank you all. Tonight is really to share a lot of information and then let you know some next steps that we plan to take as we involve other groups. So in our first slide, this document here shows all the guidance that has been given to us from DPI and the Department of Health and Human Services. And so what you will see is a Healthy Schools Toolkit, which tells all the requirements that schools must do. And then you will also see a reference guide that recently came out June 30th about what we do and how we have to respond if we have somebody that's symptomatic, someone who is positive, and the next steps. There's a flow chart. There's very clear directives that we have to follow in those steps. And then the last document is from DPI, and it's the Lighting Our Way Forward document. It's pretty thick with different sections in it. And so what we're going to try to do in the few moments that we're with you is sort of give you some highlights of the document and then really share with you what our thoughts are on next steps. All right, so our current reality, as we've heard some of you say already here tonight, Johnson County Public Schools is going to look different in the upcoming year with COVID-19. And so it is a time calling for us to be responsive, flexible, and most importantly, sensitive to the needs of all of our stakeholders. And I want to say that again. We know we need to hear from more stakeholders. We know we need more input, and this is not an end-all, say-all plan here. This is a start. All right, we got to have a baseline, and this is a start. We still have more questions to answer. However, with stakeholder input, we'll be able to answer those questions. To plan for the educational needs of our students and to protect the safety of all of our students, staff, family, and communities. We have people at all ends of the spectrum, from those who want to return, don't have any concerns, to those that are very fearful of return, and we need to hear all of them. As we look at reopening plans and they continue to be developed fully, we need to have ongoing communication. We need better communication. We need to find ways to communicate that out, and we're aware of that. And we are committed to working together to create a wonderful school year for our students, and we're going to find a way. All right, it's a new day, and we're going to find a way. So some of the highlights of this plan for you all, and I apologize, this clicker's not going too fast. Plan A, the governor put forth a reopening piece of Plan A, B, and C. This is a little different than Phase 1, 2, and 3, so that's not, I don't want you to get it confused on it. But what the governor would have said open in Plan A, that's some minimal social distancing. There's some processes and procedures that had to be put in place, but it's really site-based driven on how you do those processes and procedures. In Plan B, which was the announcement today, it calls for moderate social distancing, which means 50% occupancy, and it requires 1 per seat on a bus. Okay, and I'm going to show you some data on that as we get into the PowerPoint of what that looks like. Students experience a blended model of face-to-face learning in school, while potentially on other days or weeks via remote instruction based on whatever schedule is determined in the end. And then Plan C, which would be remote learning, and this could happen at any point in time during the year. Just because we're on B now, in a month, in a week, they could say you need to go to remote learning, and we are going to have to adjust at a moment's notice. So just a few of the highlights of Plan A. These are not all the guidelines. The document's pretty thick, but first and foremost, if they were to say Plan A eventually, all of our students can return to school. Face coverings would be required currently for all staff under Plan A, and face coverings would be required for all students in middle school and high school under Plan A. There was just an update to face coverings, and we feel like that's under Plan B, so we're going to mention it there, but it could have, once we get more guidance tomorrow, it could mean that in Plan A, that requirement's there as well. Bus transportations, parents would be expected to screen their own students prior to putting them on the bus. There would be a form to complete daily, and then when those students got to school, just like every other student, they would go through the screening process, temperature checks, symptomatic checks.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Can we stop just right there a second? And I apologize for interrupting you, but with the bus transportation, you know, and we've all heard from many, many stakeholders, would it be possible to eliminate the exposure to our bus driver and the students on the bus if we check their temperature prior to them getting on the bus rather than getting them on the bus and exposing them?
So I think we would all hope we could find a way for that to happen, but currently right now, what we're hearing from our drivers are they stop the bus, they pull the air brake, they have to give their hand signals to watch everyone come across. You could be trying to load anywhere from 1 to some stops could have 12, and the time consumption there, it could be extreme. The other piece is transportation. At one point in time, we considered putting monitors on all of our buses. You can only imagine the expense of 312 monitors. And so that has been considered. I'm not saying it's off the table, but at this moment, it doesn't seem feasible safety-wise to have a bus sitting in the road that long while we go through an actual temperature check is what we've been shared.
And if I'm not mistaken, the
No.
children would be required to wear a mask on these buses, right?
So currently, right now, they would be required to wear a mask, and we would provide those.
And I know this may seem petty in the grand scheme of things, but I was reached out to by someone who works for the district, and it makes perfect sense given the summertime heat. You know, I think we had like the 3rd hottest June on record or whatever. But summertime heat, you have some of our buses running without air conditioning, and now you've got these young children and bus drivers wearing masks, which creates a further discomfort, which creates a distraction, and we all know about distracted driving, especially in a big yellow bus. So that may be something that I think we should look into as far as like, hey, maybe limiting, maybe looking at some alternate bus routes to sideline the buses that don't have AC, because that is important, and it's especially important to the bus drivers who don't have air conditioning. I mean, it may not be affecting us, but certainly impacting them, and more importantly, it's impacting the kids. So I was reached out, and I would be a little remiss if I didn't mention that and hope that we could do something to kind of address those concerns.
So in a few minutes, I'll share our buses and our capacity. I don't have which ones have air conditioning or not, but we'll definitely make sure we look at that and get a number on that for that to be considered. So some of the other things is limiting non-essential visitors and outside groups from entering the building. It's going to be interesting. You know, I've been an elementary principal and a high school principal. You know, you want to walk your child to class and what have you. I'm not saying that can't happen. We want to limit the exposure in the building. And so some of those things are going to have to happen. Daily screenings will take place, and they will have to be spaced 6 feet apart as we go through these screenings. You know the numbers of some of our schools, so you can just sort of visualize that. If your temperature is over 100.4 or you have symptoms, you must stay home. We're looking at enhanced cleaning, especially in high-touch areas. So you can only imagine from our elementaries through our high schools, high-touch areas, doors, areas of that sort. Lots of enhanced cleaning and touching of those areas. Closing off areas used by anyone sick, including school transportation vehicles, and do use those areas while they're being cleaned or disinfected. Just think about this real quick. We have a process, as I shared in the manual. Every time a symptom is had, every time we have someone who is positive, we have to report out to the health department. We then have to follow their guidance on what we have to do next. The guidance sometimes could be to close that room down for 24 hours before you clean it, close that bus down for 24 hours before you clean it, or it could be to close down a whole school potentially for 24 hours, all depending on their guidance.
Dr. Pierce, and all those things you just listed, to me, makes it even more imperative that we do something like Mr. Sutton said, and that's if we screen the children before they get on the bus, now we don't have to worry about contaminating the bus and contaminating the classroom. And then they get to school, their temperature's checked, they're high, now they gotta go in the office and sit there and wait for a parent to come pick them up, and now we're exposing more people. I think we really have to figure out a way to check these temperatures
Well, this is a-
before a student gets on the bus.
Well, it's a board meeting, not a brainstorming session, but I would offer this idea. You could have, I don't want to say a pace car, but you could have a car or a vehicle in front of the bus beating the bus to the bus stop and have staff on hand. I mean, it would be extremely tiresome and maybe costly, but you have a vehicle in front of the bus that would beat the bus to the bus stop, check those who are there, and if it's anything like on my drive into work, you'll have kids running at the last minute to the bus, but check who you can, and maybe if you're looking for a solution to that problem, I think that would probably be the most viable solution to that issue. But if you do have one person on the side of the road trying to check 8 kids, that's going to be problematic, and it's going to be a disciplinary issue, so I would recommend that.
And I'd also like to say that with our buses, not every bus is going to have a bus monitor. And every time that bus driver has to get off that bus, he or she are leaving kids unattended on that school bus. Dr. Pierce, would Plan A in the busing, is it still one person, one student per seat?
No,
It's just
ma'am.
like we would
Max
normally run it?
capacity.
Okay, thank you.
So I got to pose a question. How many seats on a bus?
So I'm going to go through that if you can hold that question just a few minutes. But the max is 24 right now.
I'm just saying, so you got 30 students standing out there, what do we do? I mean, it's,
And so we hope in scheduling we don't have that happen, but we do have to consider that.
And Dr. Pierce, I'm sorry for all these interruptions, but, so you just detailed Plan A. Does this mean that we have to meet all the requirements of Plan A to do Plan B?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make that clear to the folks who are watching, because I don't want them to think that Plan A is separate and apart from Plan B, and yet the governor has said we're going to do Plan B, okay?
That is crystal clear. Thank you, Ms. Essence, for bringing that up.
Yes, so in addition to Plan A, as you see the next part of the slide there, and I apologize for the font there, it's all of Plan A, and remember, this list does not conclude everything. They're just highlights. Plus, facilities must be limited to occupancy of 50%. So whatever our capacity is, we can only do 50% of our capacity. Buses can only transport students 1 per seat. Face coverings will be required for all students K-12. We just learned that a few minutes ago. And no more than 2 passengers can be seated in any contract vehicles. And we know we do use some contract vehicles to transport some students to school. So at this time, we have a lot of details, but I'm going to call Ms. Whittington up to go through some stakeholder information and some information we've already gotten from our stakeholders to sort of walk through that, and then we'll come back with some more logistical information.
And just, Dr. Bracy, just let me know, we'll all receive this information they're going over tonight via email, so that we'll have this hard copy as well.
Good evening, Chairman Sutton, Lady Vice Chair, Dr. Smith, Superintendent Dr. Bracy, members of the Board of Education, and to all of our community who may be watching or listening online. As a world, as a nation, a state, and a school system, we have all been on a journey with this pandemic. Whether we are a student, a parent, a staff member, a school administrator, a superintendent, a district leader, a Board of Education member, or a community member. We have all been impacted and are experiencing this pandemic in different ways and at different levels. As we review this data, we must keep the impact of the pandemic at the forefront of our minds. That impact coincides with the representation of this data, a journey. We know that stakeholder information and input is valuable to the final decision that we have to make. As we began to plan the reopening logistical task force, or logistics, we started with a reopening logistical task force group. That group was made up of district and school administrators and staff. That task force was a representation of all of the components that were outlined in the North Carolina guidelines, such as operations, academics, child nutrition, transportation, social and emotional health and safety. All of those departments were represented in our task force. We knew we had to start with a plan. We looked at the options that were outlined in Plan B given by the governor, which was options A through F. There were many options laid out for us. So we began looking at the logistics around all of that to determine what made sense to have a beginning to that. We then took that information from that committee and conducted staff surveys, parent surveys. We had principal information sessions with feedback forms, teacher advisory council information sessions with a feedback form, and a classified advisory council information session with feedback. And finally, a family decision form most recently. We'll start by taking a look at the staff feedback that our task force began by saying we need some input from our staff and our parents after experiencing March to June. What are the feelings about returning to school at this point? If you look at this slide, this again is staff feedback early on in our logistical planning. This was conducted in early summer, and it is representative of 3,622 responses out of 5,000 plus employees. You can see there how the breakdown is for who responded to this feedback. 2,400 plus were certified. 127 were certified central office. 921 were classified school-based, and 122 were classified central office. The next slide shows a breakdown of the responses by elementary, middle, and high school. 2,452 out of those were 1,224 elementary, 568 middle, and 661 high school. One of the questions that were posed at that time in our journey was rate your level of comfort implementing online learning during the most recent COVID-19 school closure. And you can see the scale was representative of not comfortable 1 to comfortable being 3. And again, this was staff level comfort on implementing online learning. And you can see that the majority of our staff at that time felt somewhat in between not comfortable and comfortable. The next slide, the question was asked, what instructional delivery method works best for your students? Out of the 2,452 responses, 1,362 said face-to-face instruction. 720 said a blended learning model. 132 teacher-paced, and 236 student-paced. The next question to our staff, at this time, if you could choose the learning model for next year, what would you choose? Would you choose back to school building, a blended school or home model, fully online model, or I'm not sure? And you can see at that time, 1,532 said back in the school building. 1,045 said a blended school home model. 704 a fully online model, and 342 I'm not sure. Again, We also felt it was very important at that time in our journey to also poll our parents. One of the first questions we asked our parents at that time, based on the information you know now, do you think you will be sending your child back to school or going back to school if the health orders allow it? And you can see in this slide that 54.7% of our parents at that time said yes, while 30.2% were hesitant or other represented no. I won't send my child back to school, or I don't know at this time. The next question was around our learning model. At this time, if you could choose the learning model for your child next year, would you choose back to school, a blended school home model, fully online, not sure, or not applicable? And you can see there, 48% said back to school, while the other data was representative of a split between a blended school home model, fully online, or not sure. The next question to our parent and guardian feedback at this time was on the access to technology. Which best describes your access to remote learning devices? And out of the 13,084 responses, you can see at this time, 73.6% of those parents completing the survey said we have enough laptops, desktops, or tablets to meet our needs, while 9.5% said in some cases we use iPhones or cell phones to complete assignments, and 9.9% said we use district-level devices, or the other percentage represented we don't have access at this time. At that time, it was 73.6% said we have enough laptops, desktops, or tablets to meet our needs. 9.5% said in some cases we use our cell phones to access. And 9.9% said we use district-level devices. The remaining percentage was we don't have enough access. I think it's about 8%. The next question to our parents and guardians at that time was the access to the internet. Which best describes your access to the internet? At this time, 86.7% said we have access to adequate, reliable internet, while you can see the other 8.4% where we have access to the internet through a cell phone or hotspot, but you can also see that some we have access to the internet, but it's unreliable, or we do not have internet access. Okay. The next question was relative to remote learning. If students return to school as normal or in a blended model for social distancing, and you were given the option to let your child learn from home or come to school with district guidelines, would you choose this option? 47.2% said yes. 27% said yes. 47.2% said no, and 25% said maybe. We also felt it was very important that we talked with our principals at that time, early on, about what our thoughts were around picking a plan within Plan B options. At that time, the recommendation from our task force was to look at, and these were based on logistical things such as transportation and capacity in a building, meeting that 50%. So the recommendation at that time was looking at our school district in cohorts 1 and 2. So when this was presented to the principals at this time, it was option of cohort 1 and cohort 2. Out of,
If you don't mind, if I can clarify, the reason that at that time it was considered is we got a definition on occupancy to be half of the school population. At a later date, we got a clearer definition that said it was capacity. So that changes things, and I'll show that in a few minutes, like at Orchard Lodge, where they have 1,200 students versus their school might only have 800 capacity. So I'll share that a little later. just so you understand.
I appreciate you bringing that up because I'm sure other board members have received numerous emails where it was talking about within Plan B, it was 2 options. So I appreciate you clarifying that because that is something that they said they were not given additional information. And it was based on capacity at the time, not student population.
Yeah, because there has been quite a bit of distrust created because the 3-week rotation was not discussed as a possibility, and so that's created some distrust in the process.
so when we talked with our principals at that time, again, we were talking about splitting our school into 50% cohort 1 and cohort 2 based on the guidelines and how we were reviewing that at that time. Based on our principal feedback, 25 of our principals said, yes, I can support that option of cohort 1 and 2. 5 said no, and 16 were undecided or did not respond. The feedback was not denoted by names. It was anonymous feedback. We also met with the Certified and Classified Teacher Advisory Council and presented the Plan B options and proposed to them what the recommendation was at that time based on the 50% model. And at that time, based on the 46 schools that we had 36 responses. 36 responses, which were 28 yes, we can support that model, 8 no, and then 10 undecided or no response. And again, we understand that this data, as I said early on, this is a journey and a process, and this data is representative of what we were presented at that time. So since that time, we have spoken with our principal leaders. We have spoken with our teacher leaders. We have spoken to our teacher leader JCAE representative as late as today. And we know that our principals have polled their staff, have spoken with their stakeholders. We know they're having conversations about what would work in our school and what concerns do you have. And we also know that our teacher leaders have done their own surveys, as I know that you all were shared that data, I believe yesterday, which was very indicative of about 1,000 responses. And again, we know that that data will be very impactful to all of us as we make those final decisions moving forward. And we will not stop.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think this is a prime time. Thank you, first of all, for saying that this is not a done deal. I think that's where a lot of the concern has been, that there was going to be a final decision made tonight. And so I appreciate the fact that you are willing to continue to meet with stakeholders and gather more input before a final decision is made. So thank you.
We also, in those 2 documents, asked for feedback. And I would like to point out at this time some of the overarching common themes within that feedback with our principals, staff, and our staff. And I'm sure our parents have the same exact concerns. Number 1, the overall safety and well-being of ourselves and others. to a more detailed plan of how is this going to look for, number one, our staff who are having to teach potentially remote as well as online. How is that going to be impactful for our students who are also going to be in the classroom on certain days or weeks, as well as at home learning? How is all of the safety guidelines and measures going to be implemented and held accountable? How are we going to respond to childcare? Not only for our employees who have to be present at work to teach our children, but also for our parents who have to be at work to provide for their children. So those were some of the overarching concerns, and we have to consider all of those factors in making the final decision. Our last data set that I will share with you is our most recent, which was the information that came from our family decision data snapshot. Again, this data was compiled. It stayed on our website a very short time, a week, and I would like to say thank you to our parents. We had over 26,000 responses within that time frame, and that is outstanding. We ended that, or the last date to enter that data was on 7/9/2020, and that's when we pulled this snapshot for you. Throughout this set of data, we'd like for you to realize that the red represents remote learning and the blue represents face-to-face. So our overall totals for pre-K through 13, we had a total of 26,910 responses. 8,168 responded, I prefer remote, while 18,742 chose, I would like some sort of face-to-face model for my child. I would also like to point out that once the survey ended, our schools, administrators, and teams have been working to finish out our complete school system stakeholders by calling families and asking, what is your preference here if they did not receive a form decision back? So we know that this data is going to continuously change and be updated. So out of the 26,910 responses, this is another way to look at the last slide that I shared with you. Face-to-face, 18,742 chose face-to-face, and so you can see that that was roughly 69.9% of the families who completed the survey, so roughly 70%. Remote was 8,168, roughly 30.1%. This is a breakdown by grade level. So I apologize, it's small and you probably can't read it from where you are right now, but we are looking at specifically by grade level how many of our families chose remote and how many chose face-to-face. We have pre-K data, and we also have the 13th set of data represents our super seniors who are from our Early College Academy and our Career Technical Leadership Academy. We even can drill down specifically to our specific elementary, middle, and high school data and by school data. So you can see here, again, if we look at a large elementary school such as Cleveland Elementary, you can see that out of the number of families who have responded by this time, 647 chose face-to-face, while 161 chose remote. And at this time, also, if you look at Selma Elementary, you can see that 180 180 chose remote, and 173 chose face-to-face. So we expect that this data will be ever updating. Again, this is another way you can view that particular set of data. Remote learning from our elementary parents was a percentage of 28.9, and face-to-face was a percentage of around 71%. So you can see that that coincides with the overall data of about 70% face-to-face, 30% remote. The next slide is a representation of middle school data. You can see, again, for one of our large middle schools, Archer Lodge Middle, 713 face-to-face, 305 remote. And if you look at Selma Middle, again, you can see at that time when the survey closed, it was pretty even, 80-80, with the number of responses of between online and remote. Here again is a statistical look at remote learning, 31.9% from the middle school families, while 68.1% face-to-face. Again, very comparative to that 70-30 representation. And finally, here is our high school data. You can see that from a large high school such as Corinth Holder High School, out of the responses, they had 1,100 and I think 834 or 84 were face-to-face and 511 remote. If you looked at that statistically as a whole for our high school data, currently 31.2% remote and 68.8% face-to-face. Again, very even with the 70-30 split. If you looked at all the data collectively with just remote learning, you can see that, again, there were 8,000 plus families who selected remote. And from that collective group, 41.1 were from elementary families, 25.3 from middle families, and 33.6% high school. We also know that this data was representative of 26,000 of our families. Being a school system of 38,000 students, if we look at that statistically and if trends stayed currently the way it is, currently we have that 30-70 split. And if we looked at that collectively with 38,000, we could potentially be looking at 30% of that is close to 11 plus thousand students virtual. My last slide is, we spoke earlier about the technology needs. So in our most recent survey, we asked again about your technology needs in your home. And from those results, 2,600 again said, I need a Chromebook. Wi-Fi hotspot, 160. Both a Chromebook and a Wi-Fi hotspot, 600. Out of the, at this time, there were 7,694 responses from the 26,000 who responded overall. Again, this data is very important. And for all of the reasons that were shared, we are keeping this at the forefront of any final decisions that may come forth. Thank you.
Thank you for all this information. I know the board probably has many questions. I just want to say, I think I speak for the entire board and the school system. Safety is the number one thing that we're looking at. Many of us around this horseshoe have students in Johnston County Public Schools. Some of us have spouses in Johnston County Public Schools, and we've received many emails wondering if we were even concerned about our staff. And I can assure you, I have a staff member at home, and so does Mr. Wooten. Dr. Smith has a bus driver at home. So there's a lot of us that we want to make sure that safety is at the number one item that we look at. And we all have many family members outside of spouses, school nurses and so forth that work in our school system. And, you know, whatever the plan is, it all drives back to one thing, and that's transportation. There's many, many different options out there that have been just phenomenal. And it's like, wow, that's a great idea. But when you start backing into it and listening to you all in a different meeting, transportation is what drives the bus, no pun intended, of what we're trying to do here with our information. And that's a segue for Dr. Pierce, I guess, in the bus capacity piece here. But thank you, Ms. Whittington, for your information.
You're welcome. And it is our goal that we continue to uphold that first statement that Dr. Pierce shared with you. In order for us to be responsive, to be flexible and sensitive, we have to continually seek input from our stakeholders.
And Mr. Sutton, I appreciate you saying that about the teachers and the staff in our schools that'll be looking after our students and educating them. But, you know, I think it's vitally important that each principal evaluates his staff, and that there are exposures to our staff. Some might be at risk, and we have to identify the staff members that are at risk, and to make sure that we have proper coverage and make sure we protect those employees as well. I mean, it could be somebody at home they're looking after, they got to go back to, that they don't want to expose, or it might be a health issue, it might be they're pregnant, it might be any kind of medical problem that we just make sure that we're here to protect our staff too. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, and I would also like to say, I applaud you for gathering all of this data. That's huge. But it is not a substitute for sitting down elbow to elbow, socially distanced, with stakeholders and batting ideas back and forth to get the best plan that we can possibly do. You know, as a board, we're helpful people, and, you know, I noticed that immediately we started jumping in and saying, well, what if you did this or what if you did that? But I truly believe that our frontline people, the people who are going to be working with these children every day, need to be in a room, not a one-time meeting, but actually helping to develop the plan.
Thank you. And I also would be very remiss if I did not recognize that this data was compiled by a combination of several departments, being our CIA department as well as our communication department. So I appreciate all of those individuals who work to gather this data.
Just want to add this. I appreciate what Ms. Sessom said. And Dr. Pierce and Ms. Whittington have informed me that we had conversations logistically with stakeholders, staff, principals, but we have already talked about the importance of having further detailed conversations about the instructional delivery of this plan. So we certainly appreciate all the feedback that we've gotten from you as a board, and certainly we anticipate more after Dr. Pierce finishes his part as well. But yeah, this is the baseline of our plan, and we're going to have further conversations because, as you said, they're on the front lines, and certainly we respect and appreciate what they bring to our system. And I agree with Mr. Chair, Mr. Wooten, about safety being number one priority at all times. So certainly I thank Ms. Whittington for her presentation and that very impressive data, which has helped drive a lot of the decisions that have been made and that have brought us to this point. But no, we're not finished by any stretch of the imagination. We realize that. We know you all have stakeholders to answer to as we have stakeholders to answer to. So just thank you for your continued input and support to us as we move forward.
Thank you. And we know that final decisions will not possibly be a 100% confirmation yes for all, but we feel like that transparency along the way with the reasons as to why decisions are made helps for understanding and clarity and acceptance of the decision.
Agreed. I didn't mean to cut you off, Ms. Johnson. Just want to say that we have kicked around so many ideas, A week, B week, A week, B week, and we think we have it where we want it, and then transportation rears its head and makes some of those things not possible to do. So after Mr. Johnson asks his question, if there's no further questions, I'm going to ask Dr. Pierce to just get into the logistics of transportation and some of the challenges that it brings to the table. I don't know are they still here?
Yes, sir, I believe
Okay.
they are.
Okay.
Yes.
So if board members have detailed questions they want to drill down as to why we can't do this, so perhaps they can step in and answer some of those questions if necessary. Mr. Johnson?
No, real quick, I was going to thank Patty or Ms. Whittington like everyone else, but everyone can interpret data differently. The way I interpret that data, you have a lot of teachers who are ready to get back to work and they prefer that face-to-face instruction. And all things considered, I hope we get there as much as possible, because no matter how effective remote learning is, there'll never be a substitute for that face-to-face instruction. And we are only as good as the plan we have in front of us. And it seems like those flex learning days would come in handy right about now. And those developing those type things is the kind of system we're going to need to have in place moving forward. So I appreciate everything you guys have done, and I'm sure we're going to make this work.
And there are things other than just the learning. I'm concerned about food challenged children. I'm concerned about children who are left alone because their parents are having to go back to work and they have no child care. I mean, there are ramifications. No matter what decision, there are going to be lots of unintended consequences, positive and negative. And so our child nutrition staff have worked around the clock this summer, and I know that we can continue to do that, but that's no easy task either. And finding children who are in need of devices or in need of hotspots is going to take that personal one-on-one, personal contact. And that's going to require a lot of extra over and above what we would do if we were getting ready for a school year. These are additional burdens that we're asking our staff and our teachers and administrators to undertake. I just can't imagine the dedication that our teachers and staff and administrators are having to display to get all that worked out and done. And everybody deserves great credit for just being flexible. I loved your opening. But keeping those children at the forefront we will make the best decision, whether it's the best or whether it's the best that we can make under the circumstances. I just appreciate everybody's getting us there. The journey, as Ms. Whittington said.
I just want to make a comment too and just say how much I appreciate our parents and our staff. We wouldn't have this data if they didn't answer the questions. And how many times do we do surveys and we get small responses? Shows the importance of this to everybody out there. And hopefully, as we gather more information, even more people will offer feedback. But, you know, it shows very clearly that about a third of the people want their children home. And if a third of the children are wanting to, parents want their children home remotely, then that reduces this bus capacity that we have to think about. But as we move forward, hope that they will continue to give us this feedback, because that's just how, don't you always wish you got that kind of feedback when you did a survey?
Yes. So as a follow-up, when you know more, you do more. And, as we went through and got data, we responded on the data we had at the time. And so, we do not want distrust. I can promise you Dr. Bracey is going to be transparent, and we're going to walk through this thing with people. We're not going to do things that people are going to do it with them. And so here's the next step. We're going to get in the weeds a little bit and try not to get too deep in the weeds, but here's what we have. So you asked earlier about the specifics of busing. If you looked at this chart, I know you had the squint, 72 passenger bus is the largest bus we have that carries students. There's 205 of those buses in our fleet. They normally would carry 14,760 students a day. Under our restrictions now, we can only put 24 kids on that bus and only transport 4,920 students. As you go down the chart, you'll see the different capacities of 72, 71, all the way down to 21 passenger buses, only one in the fleet. We can only transport 7. So this chart right out the gate, when you look at just logistics, you don't take in consideration any other data, tells you how many you can transport to school on a 50% capacity model. Remember, we're on a 3-tier system. We got to make 3 runs, a high school, a middle, and an elementary in most cases, at 24 apiece. Also, even though we want to be efficient, when you pick up students 24, you want to make sure you don't end up running an extra 60 miles to fill the bus, so it might be more efficient to do a different route at times. So just keep those things in mind. So under Plan B, max occupancy, just sharing a few schools. I told you earlier I would share just a few schools. If you look at some of our schools, remember we have 22 schools that are capped in our school district based on capped schools. And so if you look at Archie Lodge Middle School, they have 1,287 students when we finished last year. Their school's designed for 886. They're over capacity 401. And so in Plan B, they can only have 443 students in their school at a time. So right out the gate, we could not, based on transportation and that number alone, that one school alone would not work in an A, B week or a week 1 or a week 2. Cleveland High School, 1,779, 1,200 capacity, over 579, can only have 600 students at that school on the Plan B per day. Polenta Elementary, 1,175, design capacity, 886, 289 over capacity, only can have 443 students in that school under this. And then Benson Elementary, try to pick some areas all across the county. 646 students, it's designed for 586, they're over capacity 60, and they can only have 293 in their school at 50% capacity.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
I'm concerned that I'm hearing capacity when there are cottages sitting all over and they have added capacity. The built capacity is not the same as the capacity of the school when they have cottages, and I'm just concerned that we're.
So that is why you see changes in the plan, because get different definitions at times. The 6 feet of social distancing in the cottages will not allow you to do as many in there. Can't give you exact numbers, but it does shrink down from what you could do capacity-wise.
I understand that, but I'm saying the built capacity is different than the school capacity when there are 12 cottages sitting in the yard. Do you see what I'm
Correct.
saying?
Yes, I do.
Even if they're smaller classes, capacity-wise, they're still added numbers if there are additional classrooms outside.
Right, so we have to convert to a square footage model when we get into our cottages. We still would not meet it in some of our.
So do those capacity numbers include using the cottages, or they don't?
These do not, right here, using the square footage.
Okay.
But if you take into account, and even when we were looking school by school, if a third of the parents really wanted their students to stay home, I mean, if you add that in, it looks like we still would be.
Getting there.
Okay. All right.
Hold on.
You can do math
Okay.
too,
Just
can't
give
you?
Hold on.
That was my question. If we could subtract out those students whose parents want them to stay at home and do virtual learning, would that not help?
Hold on. All right. So Plan B estimated class sizes, just so we have it out there. In K-5, our max class sizes, this is just estimate, and normally K-3, a max would be 21. We're now looking in a Plan B, a max daily of about 11 students in K-3 and about 15 in 4-5, and then 6-8, 15 to 20, 9-12, 15 to 20. So just understanding that even though the school has a capacity, each classroom is going to have a social distancing capacity that has to be met as well, okay? So a couple of the options that we want to put out there, and I want to phrase that word options. You know, we're just really trying to put out there the things we've heard and where we are. Plan A, not saying it's easy, but it might be one of the first steps that will help us get to our next steps. In Plan A, we would like parents to make a choice between option 1 and option 2. That's what happened in the family decision tree. We asked them, do you want to be virtual or do you want to come back face-to-face? Option 1, that they chose it was full-time face-to-face, and then option 2, full-time virtual learning off campus. Decisions going to be made by semester, and they would stay virtual in Plan B and C. So B and C, if we come back and the governor says, hey, you're going C, they stay virtual. The governor comes back and says we're going A, they stay virtual. They come back and say we're in B, in Plan B, they would stay virtual as well. We would develop a K-5 and a 6-12 virtual program, which would allow students to stay enrolled at their base school. And that's one of the things that we've heard from people. They want to stay enrolled at their base school. So here's some Plan B options and some things that we need to talk through and think about. So the first one is based only on logistics. Remember, transportation and capacity. If you look at it without having the family decision tree and knowing there's over 8,000 or up to 11,000 that could be virtual learners. In that model, there is not the transportation to get students to school without doing what would be suggested here is a 3-week rotation. That would break your population into thirds, and it would go a cohort 1 for a week, cohort 2 the next week, cohort 3 for the next week, and then the students would be on remote learning during the non-weeks. Remember, what we would like to happen is we would like for teachers not to have to teach virtual students, but if a student's face-to-face and remote, they would have to focus on both in and out-of-school students. But we would look at the virtual learning as them not having to do face-to-face, remote, and virtual. Okay, that's why those proposals have been put out there. And we would develop a calendar if this option was selected. People would know if I'm on cohort 1, cohort 2, cohort 3. In that model, if we stayed Plan B all year long, students would be potentially face-to-face for about 12 weeks, just so you have some context.
Dr. Pierce, let me ask for clarification, I'm sorry.
No.
I'm the teacher of these students,
Yes.
3-week rotation. I'm face-to-face with 11 of them, but the camera is on me and the students at home are still in my class?
So that is some of the weeds we've got to get in with teachers, because we've got to also understand and hear from parents. Some parents are going to have to pay for childcare. Their kids are not going to be able to be on a camera doing synchronized teaching, as that would be called. So there's a lot of logistical pieces we're going to have to work through in that remote learning piece. Exceptions to Plan B, we would bring exceptional children in K-12 self-contained classrooms to school every day. It's about over 900 of those students. Pre-K would have a staggered start, and they would come to school every single day. Transportation is a concern, so we would offer their parents contracts to help bring with transportation. Our CTLA and our ECA, which works on Johnson Community College campus, would attend school daily. So remember, this is just an option. We're calling it B1 for now. So earlier, you brought up this, Ms. Grant, and so I'm going to share this briefly based on the numbers of what we got off of the family decision tree. If we had 8,000 or more students go virtual, if that commit line was there or even more, this is now what the schools would look like if you take the 8,000 out of the number. So out of the 4 I showed you earlier, we now are getting much closer. Remember, 491 was the actual area that we needed to be at. When you split it in half, you're at 443. You're within 50 students at Archer Lodge Middle, one of the largest middle schools, potentially looking at a AB week or looking at some things all in the same week. And we'll talk about some of those other options coming up. Out of all those options earlier, in taking out the virtual students, Benson Elementary would then become in a situation where you don't have to look at a 3-tier. So as you dig into this and as more students select virtual, it could change the option of a B plan B, okay? So here's some other potential options based on 8,000 or more students going virtual. We could also look at, and this is coming on educator feedback and the number who selected virtual learning. We could also look at a cohort 1 and a cohort 2. In this, you would place cohort 1 would attend school on Monday, Tuesday. Cohort 2 would attend school every Thursday, Friday. And then you would allow Wednesdays for designated time of cleaning, sanitizing. This would also give our staff additional time to plan, receive professional development, and work on things that, for students that are not in the building. Students would work remotely when not in school, and we would develop calendars on this. Our Plan B exceptions would stay identical. All EC kids in self-contained classrooms would come every day, pre-K and CTLA and ECA. So this was, right now, is an option as Plan B2 could be considered. And this has been provided to us by teachers and principals as a potential
Dr.
solution.
Pierce, before we
Yes.
go any further, I know you mentioned earlier that if we did cohort 1, 2, and 3, our students would be in class roughly in face-to-face 12 weeks. How does this cohort right here, where they go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, what does that equate to as far as face-to-face time?
Of course, it puts them in class every week. We would need to do as far as total weeks or times, I'd have to get back with you on that exact calculation. But you're looking 2 days and normally about 36 weeks in a school year.
It's
Give or take.
2/5, 40% of the time.
So obviously, my point is it'd be more time face-to-face
Right.
with them, and they're getting in some kind of routine where they're going every week rather than every 3 weeks they're attending.
Right.
My grandchildren in Ohio had Monday and Tuesday, they did 2 subjects. Wednesday and Thursday, they did 2 other subjects, and the teachers had Friday. And it's a different situation, but they really had as you said, a routine, and they knew what to expect. If you get out of that every 3rd week, you're getting really far away from connectivity.
Well, and also in terms of just wellness, socially, emotionally, but also being in contact, being with a teacher every week so that if there are wellness issues, that it can be detected.
And Dr. Pierce, I just have a quick question. I know that we're talking about our children with exceptional needs, and self-contained classrooms will be every day. How are we going to meet the requirements of the IEPs of the students who are not in self-contained classrooms? Is DPI giving you any guidance on that?
That was my question, too.
I can't speak specifically to the DPI guidance. I can speak specifically to we're receiving lots of guidance from our legal aides on that and next steps on how we need to address that. And I know Ms. Rafford in the EC department, they've been looking at different options and even what is available as far as home visits, things of that sort.
One other point of clarification, when we're looking at families who, one other point of clarification, when we are looking at the parents who potentially chose virtual, we also have to understand that some of those may not require transportation or have never used transportation, and some may. So when you factor out those numbers, you can't assume that factoring out all of the virtual students will create capacity that meets the guidelines on our buses.
Right. Good point. Thanks.
Dr. Pierce, a lot of our service delivery model will be determined by the actual number of students that return versus the number of students that are virtual. For example, the more students or parents that choose the virtual route will obviously create more spaces for us in that are coming face to face, correct?
Sir.
And I know we've had conversations where we see the exceptional children self-contained coming every day. You, myself, Ms. Whittington, we've had conversations about the possibility and the hope that kindergarten students are
Yes.
able to come to school every day. And if more students or families choose virtual, that option could be put on the table for them to be in the buildings every day. Am I right?
Yes, sir. And I think we should also be clear to say that we may start on any of these options. We get in 2 or 3 weeks and realize we can figure out another part of it, add another grade. We can back up and add that, or not even back up, just add it.
Thank you.
The nice thing about this option, if we can do it that way where they're at least in the building every week, I know some of these students have tutoring services, and if they're only in the school building once every 3 weeks, does that mean they're only going to have access to tutoring once every 3 weeks, or?
So we're gonna definitely have to have answers to what happens during remote learning. As you know, Dr. Bracey shared earlier, you know, the exciting part to me as an educator is getting with the people that have those tough questions, and then let's problem solve them. What is the right answer for kids? And so we're going to have the answer to that question. We don't have it yet, but we're going to have the answer to that question. All right, so this would be a B3, okay? And I promise you we're not going to give you one past this, but there's probably plenty of options out there, all right? We're almost to the end, so hold on. Once again, educator feedback and the number who select virtual learning. In this plan, we could look at what we posed the very first time when we talked to principals and teachers. Cohort 1 goes for a week, cohort 2 goes for a week. All the same exceptions would apply as far as, pre-K would be in school, our self-contained EC would be in school, ECA, CTLA. The reason this is still there as an option, remember that other piece about how many students come out to virtual. We've also heard from parents, it's going to be harder for me to get 2 or 3 days of childcare than it is if I just book it a week at a time. We've got to find that out. Is that real? Where is the information there? So what we are going to be doing as our next steps is that we're going to develop 2 virtual programs to be led by district site administrators. K-5 is going to use Canvas, and Google Classroom is their learning management platform, and Johnson County school teachers will develop and lead this instruction. 612 is going to use Canvas, Google Classroom, and Apex Learning as a learning management platform, and Johnson County Public Schools teachers would develop and lead this instruction. Upon receiving the final applications to the virtual learning program, we can then determine if Plan B2, Plan B3, or other options are possible. But we really need to launch the virtual program, get an actual link out there, because as parents know more, they decide differently. Now that they know more, they may decide they don't want to be virtual, or they may be more than want to be virtual. So we're going to call this the commit line. If you commit at this time, once this goes out, you sign up, you choose to do this, then it will help us be more informed over the next few weeks on what is the right Plan B, which is how we're going to return to school. We just don't know the actual basis of that. And so the last piece of our next steps, once we get all that information, is to have information/feedback sessions with principals, teachers, and parents on the Plan B options. It's going to affect everyone differently, but we've got to continue to drill down on the data. And as you've seen, as we've learned more, we've done more. And that's what we're going to continue to do. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce. I just want to say this, is that, we commend you and Patty and the whole team for what you've done and putting all this data together. But we also thank each and every one of our parents, as Ms. Grant and others have mentioned. This is probably the highest turnout as far as a survey that I've been on the board. However, the ones that did not get an opportunity, this is your time to have your voice heard. We are not, your information is not falling on deaf ears. Even though we may not reply to each and every email that we receive, I can assure you that I read them and take it into consideration based upon the information that's provided. With that being said, we've got some great ideas and some great options that we're coming up with, and unfortunately, no plan is going to be 100%. And we just need to understand that parents, we cannot make it where it's face-to-face right now. We cannot accommodate everybody. I hear you about the child care. I understand. And I wish that there was a way around that. And I know some of the other districts are looking into ideas and things like that, and I hope we will as well. I think the virtual link is a great opportunity. I know in 3 to 5 days in Wake County, over 11% of their population went virtual. It was over 18,000 students, and I think they're continuing to climb. And I don't know what ours would be, but based upon the trends that Ms. Whittington said, it will probably be about 11,000 on the tops, which would accommodate some other ideas of maybe only cohort 1 and 2, like our stakeholders were thinking in the beginning. But unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of the data about the capacity and the definitions that you were talking about, so that made some changes. I think that we have a great roadmap in front of us, and I cannot wait to see what other data is provided in the next couple of weeks. And to go back to what Mr. Johnson said earlier, we definitely will have to have another special session. probably 2 weeks from today. That'll give us time for the virtual link to get up, maybe us to get some results from the data, and then provide more information. That gives 2 weeks of us getting closer to school as well, and who knows what may change with the governor's decisions based upon that time frame as well. But thank you very much for the detailed information that you all provided us. I know it was a lot of time and effort put into that.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Work with some fantastic people in our school district, and we are very blessed with amazing leaders in our departments and amazing principals in our buildings and amazing teachers and amazing families. And with that realization, we know that we will be able to reach consensus on whatever decision that we make.
One last question, I'm sorry. The bus people always say there's a drop dead date. When we start school, we always modify our bus routes, but they're going to have to put together routes based on names and addresses, not just generic numbers. So what is their drop dead date from when they need to know who's going to what option?
So, if they're out in the hall, let them probably answer this, but I will say, they've been working since February just to do a regular route. That's how long it takes. They've been working all weekend long. Those people are working as hard as any. As the plan molds, the time does not get any better for them. So at this moment, it's probably feasible to have a 3-phase plan, but if they are here, they can answer that better for you.
Mr. Farrell,
Hello, everyone. It's great to see you today. Wonderful day. You asked the question about the drop dead date, Dr. Smith. According to the state TIMS data manager, we were working with those folks last night, and they said that the drop dead date for their information is July 20th. So that's just around the corner. That's what we gathered, July 20th, correct?
So how are we going to get the input back on who wants to virtual learn in time to know by bus routes by the 20th?
Well, proactively, we had established an opportunity to speak with principals tomorrow so that we can determine who their virtual folks are and who their, at the time, the 1, 2, and 3 cohorts would be. So we have meetings but the thing is, if, as Dr. Pierce stated, we can have folks who have this opportunity to commit or not commit to the virtual, it would in essence be calling all the parents again to determine, okay, which route is it that you're going to go, because there's a little wiggle room in that one now.
I think that serves as a Connect Ed to go ahead and get that information out there.
Mr. Farrell,
Yes, ma'am.
this is just a hypothetical, and I'm not even sure we can do this. I do know that some school districts across the country are starting later versus newer. If that were an option for us, would that give you more wiggle room time?
If what specifically?
If instead of starting on August 17th, we start later?
That would definitely help our processes because it is going to take, as you mentioned, quite a bit of time to pull routes together. For a regular school year, the folks in the TIMS department are working on routes as early as February and March to prepare for a school year starting August 20th, 25th. And we want to ensure that we have accurate routes. The last thing we want to do is have a student standing by the side of the road and that not be their week. We want to make sure all that information is as accurate as possible.
That's my concerns too.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. Just a couple of things to kind of help you see some of the work we've already done. So we don't have to necessarily start from scratch. The family decision form links back to tabs that go to each one of the individual schools. All the principals have that information. It says whether they wanted to be remote, whether they needed to go AM or PM, what their transportation was. And then whatever decision is made about whether they're in 3 buckets, which that's what I call it, buckets, cohort 1, 2, or 3, or 2 buckets, in order for them to set their classes up,
decisions were needing to be made about how they were going to come to school, because that's how you needed to set up orientations, how I'm going to do school every day, how I'm going to do lunch every day. So what the meeting for tomorrow is, they have their spreadsheets that they sent with the 27,000 responses. Principals were then asked with their staff to go and individually call the ones who had not submitted a survey. They have been doing that all of last week and this week, so that when they arrive to the meeting tomorrow, we're meeting with them in feeder patterns, and they will work together with sibling data, with, we can take the data they have, and in our proposed plan of bucket 1, 2, and 3, we can send that to the state, and they can put that into about 85% of the workforce into big buckets for us, like A through F goes this time, G through that this time, so on and so forth. Right, so you have, so that's we've got spreadsheets that have some of that data already pulled. We have data that's all fed in from that family decision form into the spreadsheets. And then the principals have continued to input data over last week and this week with the people they are calling. So now what you're trying to do is find out how many kids are going to go remote right now. And then you can pull them off. Then you think as a principal, how many of my kids said they did not need transportation? I'm a car rider every day. You pull them off. Then you see how many of my kids are left who are bus riders, and how will that work out in bucket 1, 2, or 3, or bucket 1 and 2. The reason we're proposing 1, 2, and 3 is some things these gentlemen can tell you about if you want to hear that this evening, and that is some of the challenges with our fleet, both in how many we have that are 72s, 58 passenger riders, all those things, and the fact that every district in North Carolina does busing somewhat differently. With us, we use our teacher assistants and we use multi-tiered routes. And so those things have impacts. If you're trying to have a consistent day where it's a particular time, we propose the 3 because we can get them there in a decent amount of time. In our current situation, trying to do an A week and a B week, some of our initial struggles with the kids who have said they're going to be remote right now is getting them there without having to do runs that started extremely early in the morning and getting home extremely late in the afternoon. Those are some challenges that we're having as where we are. Now, they can take you through all those pieces. But I just wanted you to kind of know that a lot of that work has been done on the back end that's feeding in. And then your principals will work with them tomorrow to at least begin to get a framework. And then there can be some narrowing down about how you want that to look, whether it's a day off in the middle or whatever. We're proposing, our recommendations were what we felt like we could get done to start school on August 17th. There are some challenges that if you're doing some other constructs, that it changes how we route on our end and could cause some delays in getting everything as clean as we would like it to be. Most things are doable, but we have to look at the time frame we have and the number of kids and some of this final data about how many are going to choose complete remote virtual. So those are some factors, but I'll turn it back over to these very intelligent gentlemen to tell you, if you like, some other questions about some of the constraints and then some of the things we can work together on as you're making your decisions. So thanks for the time.
Stand by, please.
Yeah, don't leave yet.
Ms. Gill, with facilities and everything having a strain on supplies and stuff, I know where I work, we were having trouble getting like hand sanitizer and things of that nature. As far as cleaning supplies go, and there are things I haven't thought of, are we well stocked enough to do this thorough cleaning that you're referencing?
Right. So with our CARES Act funds, that's been a help to us as far as beginning to get supplies in as we progress through the years. The state provided us with about 2 months' worth of supplies, including thermometers, 1 per 100 students, so we've got those divvied out. The masks, some disposable masks. The state committed, I heard this today, on some cloth masks for the students. And then we have hand sanitizers, stations, the disposable ones on the walls, and stands. We have all the shields here, and the office setups are done as far as what you see out front. And then we are exploring face shields for teachers. We have a vendor for that. We have given all of our principals a PPE list as of yesterday and starting those deliveries this week, and then telling them the additional things we have. We are ordering battery-powered foggers for buses for that cleaning regimen, and then a fogger per school and that's a plug-in one that has a lot of capacity to do the things that we need. We're feeling very comfortable in that regard. Dewey will be working on a custodial cleaning regimen with recommendations from CDC. And so we're feeling comfortable with that. A couple of little wrinkles is water fountains, can't use those, have to figure out water stations. And in our Lighthouse document that we have from the state, it helps you think through all of those pieces. Finally, the one piece is signage. There's a lot of required signage. And what we have done is given our principals everything that through our CARES Act money that we're going to be printing for them, that they have all of their socially distanced signage, and then we've given them a resource folder of other things that they can use. So some of what this summertime has been is to prep your environment, both from the cleaning side and from the signage side, and then we begin to work through some of the school nutrition pieces, which are we're looking at some options for how do we do deliveries to the classrooms or send some classes to the cafeteria so you can keep that 50% capacity down even within the classroom. So we're making great headways on the logistical sides of things and feeling pretty doggone comfortable there. So thank you for asking that question. That's an area we wanted to give a good check on.
Oh, absolutely, because, like, simple things like toilet paper, hand sanitizer, soaps, and like short
Yeah,
supply.
our vendors have been very good with us for that.
Phenomenal. And just while this is on my brain, I don't know whose department this would go in. I think it would go to each individual principal. And I know we're coming up with questions, and when you guys already have the answers in a lot of cases, but like major movements and stuff, that was always a concern of mine as like a SRO, but stuff. But like maybe outlining a plan of how you will do your major
Yes.
movements,
And-
like to
and-
your buses, to your class changes and stuff, where you have limited number in the hallway.
We are even working with plans here on how do you enter the bus and how you disembark the bus, how do you come off and go towards your screening station for your temperature checks. All of those logistical pieces, these two extremely smart folks right here have been working on the logistical pieces, even right down to procedural handbooks for how we want to do all of this, logistically speaking. So there is a lot of that behind the scenes work that have been done to prep the buildings, and we just are at the point where we're going to need to talk about how we get this transportation thing going so that folks know, because it all feeds into the class list. It feeds into how I run my school for everything that I do, and then that drives how do we academically serve the kids. So all kind of patterns together.
Ms. Gill, I agree that the transportation feeds into everything. If we take a step further back, peeling the onion back, is our remote learners are going to be a huge impact on how our transportation is driven
Right.
with this information. Because the more remote learners we have, we've talked about it with Ms. Whittington's data, is better for our transportation department to design a route that makes sense in a way, because we really need to know how many virtual learners we have so that you guys can go to work.
And that's the collaboration that's next when you heard them talk about the helping for parents to know what that virtual format would look like, and then drawing that next level of decision that helps them to commit. But again, we also have to look at some of our remote learners could very well be some of our carpool families, because they may have the ability to be home. So some of that may help us, some of it may not help us. But we do have a good bulk of that our principals have been working so hard on the heels of this family decision forum to help us with that. Remember that in a plan ABC, and I think it would work the same with A and B, it's just the timing of how long it takes to do that. When I say A and B, I'm like an A week and a B week rather than ABC. You're running all those routes. You're running the same route, but you've got some people that are coming on the A week, and they're there. And so you're running the whole thing the whole time. You're just picking up different people each time. And the time it takes you to do that, when you divide them into thirds, currently with the data we have right now, is telling us it's going to take us, there's some pieces about whether a kindergartner can get to school at this time and when can we get them all to school. So those are the bits of unknowns, and especially till tomorrow when we can get those principals with us and look at what they've been able to do since we cut that first survey off, and that we've to see how much more work that they've done. But you're still running the routes. And so let's say that we go to option A, that things get great by the time we get to, let's say, March. And we hope it won't be that long. You've got them in the database, and you just revert back to normal. Or let's say we can begin to increase our capacity, and you can start adding more and more back in. So we start out, what these folks have been doing, the professionals in TIMS, is they have been working on those routes like they always start on around the February time with those bell times. Remember when we had that conversation? And so they've been routing that, and now they're having to go back now, and we're working on, with the principals, getting them into the groups that will meet the social distancing guidelines. Does that help a little bit?
It does. Go ahead. We had talked earlier about logistically checking temperatures before students got to school, i.e. the bus drivers. Did we get the clicker, non-touch thermometers?
We get 1 per 100 for all of our 45 schools, and those are ready. We will need to do some more dependent upon our final plan in regards to busing. Remember that we've run some initial numbers about what it would cost, and then we're 3.5 weeks really before, about 4 weeks before we get school started, about in the millions of dollars to get attendance to do the buses. Remember, there's an attestation form, though, where parents can have it with them in their hand that says, I have checked my child's temperature. So there are districts that are having their legal teams to review those forms. And I know we've got some different samples if you want to talk through those. As you plan. But you're always going to have the point of entry at the school level, whether you're carpool or bus, you're going to always have that temperature check station ready to go.
My question was, is it the touchless? Okay, thank you.
It's going to be like the one we've got there. I've got one to show you.
My
if you
my
wanna
only
see it.
concern with those, and I know it's nothing around that, the state's provided it. I've had this happen. As I'm going back in doctor's offices, they're using that little touch one right here at your forehead. You can be standing out in the sun on the phone for a little bit, and it skews your temperature. B, you're in the car with the air conditioning blaring, it cools your forehead off, and it's going to skew your temperature lower. I understand that's what the state's giving us, but it's not an accurate reading
And
at
there
all.
also are some technologies out there, which is kind of the infrared and scanners that airports and different folks are using, and we've begun to take some looks at those as well. I mean, just about everything is on the table to try to do as much as we possibly can. We had talked about entrance patterns when they get on the bus. Those who had an attestation form could be seated near the ones, if they did not have an attestation form and we weren't checking their temperature, that they were in a section that perhaps could help us know who they were, because you can't leave them on the side of the road. But we know we have a lot of procedural things in those regards to think about. Every district is thinking through these same things about the temperature checks in the morning time. Again, you've heard the folks here talk about the struggles with the morning routes and what it would be like to try to take their temperatures. Some kids, it's 1 sitting out there ready because we stop right at their house, and some, it could be 12 at a subdivision. But I'll turn it back over to these
One more
gentlemen.
Don't leave yet, don't leave yet. No, it's my turn, Ronald. I've been waiting patiently. So, Ms. Gill, I know registration for new students opened up, a couple weeks ago. How many parents normally wait till the last week to register their students? Because we got to
And you have
count
to
those
build-
big numbers in there as well.
You'll have to build some cushion into your capacities, we had talked about as well, because on a 72 passenger having 24, you've got to have some room in your cohorts, no matter whether you go A or B group, to be able to get those folks in. So yes, we will have to be hand adding in people even after we have, and we traditionally do that all the time anyway.
So we need parents to register their students right now. If they are going to be so, we can get them in the virtual account and everything else as well. Different than the bus topic, because I asked this earlier and you weren't in here. I know with the CARES Act and the House bill, we got a little over 5,000 more Chromebooks. How close are we going to be to every student having a Chromebook?
I spoke with Michelle Turnage today, who we've done multiple things. Let me kind of take you back to move forward. There is a spreadsheet that our teachers worked on at the close of school that helped to say, did your child after remote learning have a hotspot? Did they have internet access, or did they need a device? So we have that, plus these surveys you saw that helped us to make some determinations. Now what we're doing is we are checking our numbers with what the school bought in the spring. So starting today, Michelle and Krista are going by and working with schools to say, your inventory at the close of the year said you had this many Chromebooks. Did you order any in the spring? How many do we totally have on your site? And then we're able to use those numbers to help us see where the ones we're getting in centrally, where we need to supplement. So that's the first step of the process. In talking to her today, we do feel we have the capacity to cover the needs of the students, even if those did not come in, because we're probably on a 5-week potential wait time, even ordering them today. So she felt comfortable with that. We're going back and checking those numbers to make 100% certain, and as they come in, where we have holes, our district purchase will help to support those schools in what we're doing. So that's one area of it. The second area of it is we may actually have some folks who asked for Chromebooks this time who didn't ask for it last time because they struggled with trying to do it at home in mom and dad's older PC, and they're finding the kids are trained with the Chromebooks. The kids get those very easily, and that's how we instruct. So we might find that we have more based upon that. We also have some schools who have worked very, very hard to promote bring your own device initiatives like at Archer's Lodge. So the principals have been working to piece those things together when we opened and closed last year, and we'll do so this year. What we'll need to do even more with is the connection of the family with the hotspot. We have the hotspots here, 750 right now. We potentially need upwards of 2,500. That is not a problem to get them. It's just we started with this number. We'll literally take that kid and assign their address and parents to those hotspots. Remember, those will be Sprint ones. If they don't work because they live somewhere very remote, then we're going to be looking at the Khajiits, which are Verizon-based. And then if that doesn't work, then through our House bill, you could put a grant in, which we did, waiting to find out, for the ones that go in the parking lots of the schools. And we've put in to have one at every single school, so they'll go kind of in the front door so you can go to that parking lot and get filtered, safe internet access. So we feel that we're moving in the right direction there.
Sounds like it.
Now, let me tell you this. We've also, with Paula's help in CIA, ordered a product called ClassLink. We're getting ready to work on that. So parents were struggling nationwide with having so many sign-ins and little logons for everything, driving folks nuts. And so we're working to have a kind of a putting one code in, and you can get everything, and that's called ClassLink. So we're working with that as well. A lot of these parts and pieces are all working together and doing pretty doggone good. Now we just got to put them all together and get ready to kind of go with things.
Last thing, you brought up water fountains. And I know probably elementary school kids, that's a a really hot topic for those parents, more than middle school and
Yeah.
high school.
And there's
Every
some
kid wants to
schools-
go to the water fountain.
They're lots of fun.
But I know, I hear that some of our schools have the water fountains that have the water bottle dispenser, so you can fill up a water bottle or cup or whatever. Do we have many that have those? Should
No, we don't.
We just have a
Most
few.
have, in fact, we still struggle trying to make sure all of our water fountains stay operational because kids like to play with them. But what I will say is that there are some districts that are doing bottled water. There are some that are doing kind of water stations. There's all sorts of ways to look at that. We have to come up with that. Even when it comes down to going into your restroom and you have 3 sinks, one sink has to be marked off. So you've got not everybody going in, and those kinds of procedures and processes.
The water stations, if you have that, though, are people, that would require people touching.
Yeah, we've talked, that's the thing.
Right.
Unless you do an individual water bottle, if you have the ones like you have when you go to a picnic and you have this, that's
Right.
not really helping you unless you individually have to serve it. So all of these things are in these Lighthouse documents and have really helped us to have these kind of conversations about logistically how to do it, even the movement within the hallways.
Thanks so
Gil,
much.
You know, I'm gonna go back to the temperature thing again with the buses. To me, it's we're gonna expose and a lot of people, the bus driver as well as other students. What I would like to know is, I've heard from other counties that they are actually checking temperatures prior to the student entering the bus. My ultimate goal for Johnston County Public Schools was we would do that as well.
I agree.
Let
And
me
so
do
I would
this.
like, I would like to gather more information of what other counties around us, what they're currently going to do.
Right. So there's a couple of resources, and Dr. Bracy may have others as well, but we have been collaborating with what's called the Big 12, and we have been getting together with conference calls with them, because the 12 largest districts many times have some of the same challenges. So let us reach out to those folks and find out where they've landed on that particular topic, and that may help us to have some good guidance moving forward.
I guess my question, Ms. Johnson, I know you have a comment. Leaving a student at the road if his parents have already gone to work,
Can't do that. I mean, there's going to have to be some places on that bus for those students and process to safely bring them home. And then, as Dr. Pierce met with the principals this week and said, you need to begin to identify those confidential, safe areas at your school where you take kids to, our health professionals or other assigned folks to do that follow-up that would have to be done after that, especially if they're symptomatic.
Sure.
And you mentioned those Lighthouse documents several times. It seems like they're really helping
Lighting the way.
They're lighting the
Yes.
way. I like that. Seem to be the answer for everything. But quick question. I know we talk about logistics, but eventually someone's going to have to implement something. And thinking about the custodial staff and the majority of the cleaning efforts, I would imagine, would fall on their shoulders.
Daunting.
It is daunting. However, they also have other duties. Bus duties would be a concern.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure someone's thought of this already, but they may have to suspend their duties. We have to come up with an alternative because cleaning that building is going to be a 24/7 job. And my question is how many custodians are we currently short? Because you may be able to get by missing one in a school pre-COVID-19, but post-COVID-19, you're not going to be able to get by with what you have. So can
You're
you tell me how many custodians you're short? I know that's an
Cannot
unfair
tell you
question. Yeah, I
that.
understand
I
that.
cannot tell you that. I can find that out for you, but that is a continuous struggle. I would dare say that there is no schools but a few that are completely 100% stocked with their fantastic custodians. Here's the way that custodial issues are there. We have explored whether we could afford or could we bring in temp services to do nightly sanitations in some form or fashion. We've discussed that. We've discussed that Johnston County Public Schools has prided itself on floors that were so shiny, and we're good at that. We've talked about that in order to do the sanitation that needs to be done with high-touch surfaces, you may have to switch out some of the other things. So you can't expect them to do cafeteria duty, which some of them do. Some of them even do helping the kids get in the morning. The buffing schedules, you can't expect all of that and still do the high-touch sanitation situation. So we're going to have to explore both of those options, I believe. I also believe the use of the foggers, the anti-static foggers, can really help with that. And then we have a midweek process we're looking at for our sanitation of our buses, and even caddies to put on the buses for when you arrive, to have your squirt of hand sanitizer ready to go. So just about, and face shields for our drivers, so because of that situation. HVAC and the airflow has to be considered as well. And they recommend the buses have their windows down for airflow as well.
Those foggers, how long do you have to be out of the building before you can
They
re-enter?
want you to do them in the evenings. So
And
that,
you can re-enter in the morning?
yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
I want to ask Mr. Britt a quick question. We talked about additional, Mr. Johnson talked about custodial support. If we needed to add additional custodial support, it is optional under the CARES Act funding, correct?
Sir, it is. Yep. Both for,
Okay.
for salaries and for overtime. So both.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my next question. While I got you, Mr. Britt, we welcome you to Johnston County too. We're excited about you being here. But at the same time, can you give the Finance Committee or the entire board what we received from the CARES Act, what we've spent, what it can be used for, so we'll have an idea of what that brought to the, over and above our budget. And obviously, we're talking about how shiny our floors are. Some things are going to have to go lacking to adapt to the safety of our students and staff. So I'm sure it will still look nice, but safety is the key. But I would like to see what amount we got for the CARES Act for the total county, and then what we can use it for to get additional help, possibly to take care of this. So I appreciate it.
There's a couple different pots of money. So the CARES Act, federal funding is the largest pot of money that we received. It was $7.4 million for Johnston County schools. So that is being split up to pay for technology, to pay for summer employment, to get the schools prepared to come back. It's additional employment for assistant principals to help make schedules and help principals get through this process. There's money for supplies, cleaning supplies, for face shields for teachers. There's quite a bit that's in there. I don't have the exact numbers with me as far as the breakdown of each one, but I can get that for you. Yes, sir.
When we, Mr. Wooten, have our initial Finance Committee meeting, Stephen will have that budget and discuss it in great detail with you.
Sure will.
Do you as a board want to see it before then? We can send it to you. It's no problem.
As long as you share it with the Finance Committee, and then
We'll do that.
then we'll share it with the rest of the board.
We'll do that.
We do want to just welcome you. This is our first opportunity to say that publicly. We said it privately, but thank you for coming.
Thank you. I wish it was under better circumstances, but I appreciate the welcome.
Any further questions for him, board members? Mr. Wooten?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, Mr. Farrell, Mr. Holloman, thank y'all for your tirelessly work you're doing back at Transportation. I know you start in February for a normal year, and Mr. Williams, who's not here with you guys today, is your third wheel. But we do appreciate all your hard work, and we know that these plans that are been thrown around, great ideas from many different principals across the county, they go back to what we can do feasibly from a transportation standpoint. So I know you guys are working very hard, and it's a lot of headaches involved and stress involved, but we do appreciate your efforts.
Professionals work in our TIMS department, if you could tell them.
We have a TIM staff of 4. So, yeah, that team has been working weekends, nights. They're probably still at the office working this evening. So,
Are they located at transportation as well? They might need a Bernie's before us.
You don't look like it.
And Chad, you've been on the job how long?
I think March 26th.
Congratulations.
Maybe.
No, thank you guys very much. Do we have any more questions for our transportation group? Thank you all very much. Before we go into policies with Dr. Pierce, we're going to take a break of at least 10 minutes, please. Dr. Pierce, we are. Take it over.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we have 13 items for approval and 2 items for information. The first item up is Policy Review Committee meeting dates for the 2021 school year. These dates are being presented for approval.
I entertain a motion for the policy review meeting dates for 2020-2021. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Sessoms. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
Next is Board Exhibit 8A4, which is Policy 2302. Since being presented for information, no additional changes have been made, so I present this for approval.
Policy Code 2302, remote participation in board meetings. As an action item, I entertain a motion. Motion by Ms. Johnson, Ms. Grant, second by Mr. Johnson. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Policy Code 2500 hearings before the board. This policy is going to be in place of 1300, and no additional revisions have been made since being presented for information. It is being presented for approval.
Policy Code 2500, I entertain a motion. Motion by Ms. Grant, second by Mr. Johnson. Any questions and comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
Policy Code 4351, short-term suspensions. No additional revisions since being presented for information, and so it is being presented for approval.
I entertain a motion for policy 4351. Motion by Mr. Wooten, second by Ms. Grant. Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
Next policy is Policy Code 4352, removal of student during the day, and it is being presented for approval. No changes since being presented for information.
I entertain a motion for policy 4352. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Grant. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
Board Policy 4353, long-term suspensions, 365, and expulsions. There's been no additional changes or revisions since being presented for information, so it is being presented for approval.
Entertain a motion for policy 4353. Motion by Ms. Grant, second by Mr. Johnson. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
This time we have Policy Code 4362, and this policy has had no revisions since being presented for information, so it's being presented for approval.
I'll entertain a motion for policy 4362. Motion by Mr. Wooten, second by Ms. Grant. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
Policy Code 4345, student discipline records. This policy has had no revisions since being presented for information, and so it is being presented for approval.
I'll entertain a motion for policy 4345. Motion by Ms. Grant, second by Mr. Johnson. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
Policy Code 4370, student discipline hearings and procedures. There have been no revisions made since being presented for information, so it's the recommendation to approve.
I'll entertain a motion for policy 4370. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Wooten. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
Policy Code 4301, authority of school personnel. No revisions have been made since being presented for information, and so we are presenting for approval.
Entertain a motion for policy 4301. Motion by Ms. Grant, second by Mr. Johnson. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0.
Yes, ma'am.
I cannot get logged on. Will you alert me when I'm supposed to say? Thank you, sir.
Policy Code 4328, gang-related activity. replacing our policy of 4215, and no revisions have been made since being presented for information, so it's recommended for approval.
Entertain a motion for policy 4328. Motion by Ms. Grant, second by Mr. Wooten. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries 7-0.
Policy Code 4400, attendance. This is replacing our policy, attendance policy and absence policy, and no revisions have been made since presenting for information.
Entertain a motion for policy 4400. Motion by Ms. Grant, second by Mr. Johnson. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries 7-0.
Policy Code 6125, administering medicines to students. This policy was presented at the last board meeting following the school board associations, but based on talking with our school nurses, we felt that it was the need to revert it back to our current policy with some minor revisions. So there have been revisions, but it is recommended, the recommendation of the Policy Review Committee to accept our current policy with revisions, and it's presented for approval.
Entertain a motion for policy 6125. Motion by Mr. Wooten, second by Mr. Johnson. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries 7-0.
Next policy is Policy Code 4304, Code of Student Conduct. This policy will be replacing Policy 4200, which was last revised November 12, 2019. And the Code of Conduct has been being worked on by principal groups, by the School Board Association, and our legal aid. And so it is the recommendation of the Policy Review Committee to adopt Policy 4304, and it is presented for information. I would ask, in the essence of time with school starting in our parent gazette, that we would consider putting this as a approval exigent.
We would need to move first to make it exigent circumstances because of the tightness of the schedule.
So I'll entertain a motion to move forward. Yeah, move for exigent circumstances. So Dr. Smith is a motion, Ms. Sessoms is a second. Any questions or concerns? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
And
That
then
motion carries
and then
7-0.
We need to approve the policy. Is that right? We need,
So Ken, give us some guidance, but they, what? Gotcha.
good. Yes. I did have one comment.
Yes.
There are some things in this policy that the Policy Review Committee was not fully supportive to put in there, but due to the time limitations and the training that would be necessary to go to mitigating and aggravating circumstances, the training that would be necessary for principals, we are, I guess, going forward with it. But some things don't make sense, and we want to make sure that we're not one and gun reacting and having a student kicked out of school for 3 days for something that should be a teachable moment. And so I just want to go on record for the Policy Review Committee saying that, for example, if I may just bring up an example, tardies. Students sometimes don't have any choice about being tardy. I know the bus comes by their house, but it's not their fault that they're tardy. We have up to 3 days, and it starts out saying you can be suspended for 10 days, or you can go fewer, or then you can go fewer. And for a student who is tardy, he needs to pay that time back rather than being kicked out of school because he's missing instruction, and our purpose is to keep students in school and having them learning. And so the logical consequences sometimes in this newly revised policy don't always fit our philosophy. And so we're going to give it a year, and I won't be on the board next year, but I'm so hoping that the Policy Review Committee will continue to work with principals to get this teaching first, discipline second, and punish third, rather than going straight to the out-of-school suspension. If I may mention one other example, plagiarism. There are students in graduate school in the university who don't know about what is and is not intellectual property. You can Google Siri and get any information within seconds. And so it is, again, in the policy to suspend students. And we've got to teach first. They have to understand what plagiarism is, what it's called the academic integrity policy. We've got to teach them what that means and how important intellectual property is before we start just kicking them out of school. So I just wanted to editorialize that so that we are trying to keep students in school now virtually as well as in classrooms. Just thank you for letting me take that moment.
All right, so I will entertain a motion for policy 4304. Motion by Mr. Wooten, second by Mr. Johnson. That's okay. Any other questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Last policy is Policy Code 4050, Children of Military Families. This policy is a new policy that was referenced in our attendance policy. It recognizes unique circumstances faced by children of military families who are often required to transfer to a new school system because of their parents or guardians having a new military assignment. And so it's the recommendation of the Policy Review Committee to adopt Policy 4050, and it's presented for information. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce. I would like to say thank you to the policy committee. These are a lot of policies and a lot of work went into this, so thank y'all for your hard work and time to make sure that these policies were taken care of. Thank you, Dr. Pierce.
Good evening again, Chairman Sutton, Lady Vice Chair, Dr. Peggy Smith, members of the board, and Dr. Eric Bracey. It's a pleasure to be with you again. And I have one item this evening, which is Board Exhibit 8C1, a lease that we'd like to turn into a purchase of mobile units. Johnston County Public Schools currently has 201 mobile classrooms that we have installed across the district, which are a combination of owned and leased. These units are necessary to provide us with sufficient classroom space as required by Department of Public Instruction. That's not currently available with our existing infrastructure, knowing that several of our schools, many of our schools are over capacity with brick and mortar. Facility Services staff has identified 10 units that are currently being leased that could be converted into a lease purchase agreement. These units are located in an area where it's more economical to have them be purchased instead of a continuing long-term extended lease agreement. We have had all of these contracts vetted and reviewed and approved with our legal counsel. And we're recommending for approval the linked financial agreements with KS State Banks to purchase these existing lease units. I do also recommend that for approval today, and if you have any follow-up questions, I also have our construction officer, Mr. Brooks Moore, here to answer any other questions that you might have that maybe I cannot answer for you this evening.
All right, I'll entertain a motion for the lease purchase for select mobile units. Motion by Mr. Wooten, second by Mr. Johnson. Any questions or comments for Mr. Moore?
Mr. Moore just came to us from having a prior meeting. I did want to tell you we have 91 leased units and 108 owned units. That's before this purchase that we do.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no other questions or comments, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
It's the easiest time I've had. Thank y'all.
All right, before we adjourn, we do need to entertain a motion on the superintendent recommendations. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Wooten. Any questions, any questions, comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That is the end of our agenda tonight. We will be probably having a special session 2 weeks from today. We'll get more information out. We'll make sure the media has all that information once they get more data and can provide us on school reopening. But looks like maybe 2 weeks from today, maybe 5 o'clock is what we're shooting for. But then our next regular scheduled meeting would be Tuesday, August 11th, 4 p.m. closed, 5 p.m. open. So at this time, if there's no further comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Johnson. Second by Mr. Wooten. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0. We're adjourned.